I've managed to get hold of Joe Meek for a podcast interview. It's high time that we had Joe onto the podcast series, not only because Joe is a quality athlete. We don't have enough women on this series, I've realised, but also Joe's a friend, so I think that's one of the reasons why I held off interviewing her, because it feels a bit weird interviewing your friend sometimes. But anyway, Joe is still glowing, basking in the glow of having won the Cape Wrath multi-day ultra. Joe, you're still recovering. How are you?
Yeah, I'm recovering well actually. So when I finished, I was really swollen, my face and then my legs, and all that is beginning to go. So all I'm left is with the injuries I've picked up on the route. But they pale into insignificance because I'm so happy with the result. So
Yeah, I mean, anyone who knows you probably knew that you were in serious training, and that can only mean one thing: watch out, everybody else, because Joe's meaning business. How long have you had this one in your sights for, and why?
I think I was just entered just before Christmas. But I did a couple of little races first, and then started training. The difference with the training for this one was just sort of longer runs with the pack just to get used to it, and then adding a lot more elevation in, and for once embracing Dartmoor on all her bogs. So just get, because I knew that Scotland would be like that. So I've had it in my sights for a while, and then just trained for the last 3 months specifically for it. And I wanted to do it because I love an A to B route. I love the idea of a journey. So it really ticked my box on that front.
Yeah, and then so like, how does it compare to? I don't know. You've done the Marathon des Sables, and you've done some very long ultras abroad in various countries. How does it compare to those?
I think the main difference that I felt was, so most races were over 6 days, maybe five, and this was eight. And I must admit, the last couple were a real struggle. So in that respect, it was harder to maintain the drive for 8 days continuously. But in terms of sleeping in a tent and everything else, it was easier because the catering was fantastic. Whereas with the Marathon des Sables, you have to look after yourself.
Yeah.
And the camp life was pretty luxurious, to be honest. You were warm every night in a sleeping bag, and yeah, the logistics had all been done for you. So all you had to do was
Yeah. What about midges? Did you get them?
oh yeah, midges, they were bad. They on the first few days, oh my god, they were bad.
How
Yeah, I
did you
mean, I
get?
took a net and wore that. But and I luckily actually they bit me, but they didn't leave marks. So some people had really red marks all over their legs and arms and bits of flesh that the midges had attacked. But for me, they obviously thought I was too scrawny. They didn't want to bite.
I've heard they don't like vegetarians. Are you vegetarian?
Well, the whole camp was vegetarian.
Right.
No meat was cooked, so they would have been really disappointed with that.
So what was your go-to? Did you make your own, or did you buy something to put on?
What was the first part of the question?
What? So what did you?
What
How
was
did you ward off the midges then, apart from the
me?
net? Yeah. What did you wear?
Oh, I actually just bought some spray as well, um, and then most of the time just covered up completely. Um,
Okay.
so it was fine actually. I mean, I think it was worse for the volunteers because they were exposed to them for a lot longer. Whereas once I started running, they I didn't notice them.
Yeah. Okay.
So
And you said that your ankles are probably the hardest hit.
yeah, so I've really irritated the tendons at the front just from picking my feet up all day, every day over bogs and heather and rough ground. The last 2 days, I must confess, I took painkiller just to get through them. And I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't have finished it. I taped them as well to see if that would help. I would have done anything to try and finish it. So, but
Yeah.
they're really sore now. I mean,
Yeah. So you're gonna have a few days off now. How long?
tendons take a few weeks to recover.
A few weeks. Yeah. So I was going to ask you in terms of preparation. You have to be a bit of a good Girl Scout or Boy Scout, Girl Guide, I should say, for an event like this because it's quite a lot of it's in the packing and preparation, which is
Yeah, I think that's a great question because I would say uh, it makes all the difference. If you're not prepared with the stuff beforehand, I reckon the week would be really stressful. So I went through their website and I spoke to loads of other previous competitors with like a fine tooth comb. And then you'll ask John, he thought I was like all the kit out was becoming part of the furniture. I had it out for weeks before and then just tinkered with it. I literally, yeah, went to town on that and it was fine. I hadn't forgotten anything. Everything I took was what I needed, didn't take any extra. And it really worked. But yeah, they're on the website, they really bang on about blister kits and survival blankets and things like that. So I bought the official survival blanket, but I didn't buy the official blister kit. I made up my own, but luckily I didn't have any. So any blisters at all.
how
But
do
I
you get
think a
out
lot
of
of that was down to like really good foot prep. So good socks, good shoes, short toenails. I moisturised my feet at night. I used talcum powder as soon as I finished, and yeah, I was really on it. So
okay and did you find that you had bad blisters by the end of the week or not really?
no, didn't have any. And yeah, I sometimes can get blisters, but no, I didn't have any. It was great. So yeah, I got pretty neat feet again. Well, for me.
Awesome. Okay. And so, like, in terms of, I guess you got quite a lot of sleep because I imagine you got there before everybody else. So you had quite a lot of time to put around the camp.
Yeah, you put around, do your admin. There was always a river or lake nearby, so I washed. Unlike a lot of people, because it was freezing. So as soon as I finished, I jumped in the cold water, completely
Yeah.
naked, which obviously meant that put other people off. And and then I washed and then got warm and ate, and so all that was good. And we were always in bed by like 9 o'clock, 8:30. But sleeping, oh God, my legs were on fire. I just really struggled to sleep. So in theory, you could have had 9 hours or something. But I reckon every night was, I don't know, 5 or 6, which for some people that's fine. And actually for the week it was fine. But and normally I'm a bit of a dormouse, so
What
I
was the
like
weather
my
like?
sleep. It was good for the first like few days, and then as we got higher and further north, the rain and the winds picked up. So we had one day where it was just really up high, it was just really drizzly, misty, foggy. And then the next day it had like 40-mile-an-hour winds and rain. But then as soon as we dropped down, it was just fine, Scottish sunny, not brilliantly sunny, but at least there was no rain. So I
Yeah.
would say pretty lucky because last year it was torrential rain and that would have been a miserable experience. So
Right. So you were relatively lucky with the weather this year.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I would say, yeah, really lucky.
And so in terms of
Um,
like the river crossings now, because I had a few clients who took on a navigation courses and they were training for the Cape Wrath and they were most worried about the river crossing. So we
yeah,
practiced.
because there hadn't been much rain. The hard. I mean, I don't think there was a river crossing that went above my knee, so it was
Really?
fine.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely fine.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I didn't take. I mean, I did take poles, but I never actually used them. So I think people took poles because they thought that might help with river crossings. But yeah, they wouldn't have needed them.
Okay. How much of it was runnable then compared to being
I
unrunnable?
I'd say quite a lot. From memory, the only bits I couldn't run were the bits that I were so steep uphill, which is pretty normal. Um, I'd say 85% runnable. I mean, a lot of it was pathless bog, and so it's not really running; it's sort of shuffling, skipping, hopping. But you could still move, relatively well.
Mm.
I mean, it was really slippy, slidey, but um, yeah, I would say it's pretty runnable on the whole. Having said that, God knows how, because people do it in a oneer, like the whole distance, keep going. I don't know how they do that. That would things would soon become unrunnable with fatigue.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a miserable experience.
So in terms of the competition, then, yeah. So I know you were quite a few hours ahead of the next woman, but you weren't that far off the first guy, or indeed the third guy. Did you at any point think you might give them a run for the money, the guys at the front?
So I knew as soon as we'd done day 1 and 2 that first and second place had gone men. They were brilliant. Um, but then the third place, I thought, oh maybe, but actually as it went on, he proved to be really good at technically descending. So he pulled away generally through his descending skills.
Hmm.
And then I just lost out on as I fatigued, but and also as my shins got worse, which made it a lot harder to run on the tracks and downhill. Um, the guy that was behind me then moved in front, so then I became fifth. But I was fourth for it for a while, but I just couldn't maintain that. So yeah, I was probably 3 hours, a bit over 3 hours in front of the women, next women, and the men. The first man was 5 out. Oh no, actually, like 7 hours in front of me.
Okay. Was it like the Dragon's Back? Were you stack? Did you choose a start time and staggered each day? Or...
We didn't really choose it. If you finished in a certain time, you were told to start later. So everyone started at 7, and then the people who were faster either started at 8 o'clock or 8:30.
Okay. So
So
so how much of it did you have company for, and how much of it did you run alone for?
yeah, no, I would say days 1 and 2 had company, but then after that, as people fatigued and performances varied over the different terrain, I had no company.
Okay.
Yeah, I had none. So I just happened to be in a gap of people.
Yeah.
So that was pretty lonely. But
So your navigation had to be pretty spot on then.
well, to make it competitive, everyone runs with a Garmin and a GPX file.
Mhm.
And that's great until, as I discovered, my Garmin catastrophically failed. So the battery life was fine, but suddenly this triangle of doom came up
Oh no.
and it failed. So yeah, I had to navigate, and it typically went when it was over 500 meters up and it was raining and windy and cold, and there was no one in sight, so I couldn't even look to them for directions.
I know. So you had to get the compass out.
Yeah, that was really stressful. I was I was emotionally exhausted when I got back down on that day.
Yeah.
But
But you
but
managed
yeah,
to find your way because from what I've heard, people I've spoken to, there's actually quite a narrow corridor, and you're not, and if you go out of bounds, you're disqualified. Is that right?
well,
Or are
I
they
think
flexible?
they give you a kilometer, I think, either side,
Right.
because you're carrying a tracker and they're watching the tracker.
Yeah.
So if you go too far, the tracker will beep.
Okay.
So it didn't go that. Obviously didn't go that far um away from the track,
Hmm.
but and they probably enjoyed seeing this like lonesome number on the tracker just meandering around as she was trying to work out where the hell she was.
Yeah.
But but yeah, I mean they wouldn't really let you get super lost. I think one guy got evacuated off. He was going too slowly up high with the 40 mile an hour wind. So I think they made the call to go and see what was going on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
So presumably they had how many checkpoints did they have on each day then?
2 or 3.
Okay.
So and some of them were quite remote. So
Hmm.
it's just a 4x4 vehicle and a couple of chaps. Um, and then they always had like one of those chaps would have been, or both of them, rescue party trained.
Yeah.
Uh,
But you're carrying most of your own food, are you, as well?
Only for what you want that day. You're carrying
Yeah.
all your own food. So the checkpoints had nothing.
Okay. Okay.
They were just safety checkpoints,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
then you carried everything.
And then you
Uh,
finish at Cape Wrath. Now, I've never been to Cape Wrath. What's it like?
it is pretty desolate. Amazingly, there's a couple of people that live there in the lighthouse, and what a place! I mean, I don't know. They must be made of sterner stuff. It's um, it's literally just a lighthouse. There's a little cafe there, which charges like £5 for a can of Coke or something, and then you have minibus drivers that, because the only way up there on a reasonable way is either walking the Cape Wrath Trail or up this track, which is about 11 miles long. So
Mhm.
cyclists do it or hikers, and then you can get lift back on the minibuses.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
so yeah, and all that's up there is obviously the lighthouse, and then these outer buildings. Um, and then yeah, I mean it was windy and cold, So, I mean, I don't imagine that's ever very different. So it's a bit desolate, really. It's actually a little bit of an anticlimax because you can't like sit down and enjoy it because it's too
Yeah.
cold. But it
And
was
then,
nice to see the lighthouse.
and then they take you back to where?
Yeah, so then you get the minibus back down this track, which takes about an hour, and then there's a little ferry to take you across to the mainland, essentially, to near Durness.
Right.
And then there was a camp set up, so we stayed the night there, and prize giving happens there, and then the next day the coaches come and take you back to wherever you need to go. But I went back to Fort William, and that took about 5 or 6 hours,
Okay.
so it's quite a lot of logistics.
Just
um
getting back to base.
yeah, exactly.
And was John waiting for you there then? Or was he?
No, so he was looking after the dog at home, but he was exhausted from watching the tracker. There was one time, and he sent me a screenshot where everyone else is going left and I'm going right, and he's shouting at the tracker. So
Yeah.
yeah, he was holding the fort at home, but that's probably just as well because you're pretty tired. And then it took from Cape Wrath to home. It took about 18 hours.
Right.
So really, you just want to get home, and
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a long bus journey.
yeah.
So, what was the mix? Because I know at the Dragons Back you had people from Japan and New Zealand. Well, I don't know about New Zealand, but all over the place. But
Yeah, they did. They had Australians and Europeans and Americans. Even some Americans had come to volunteer because if you volunteer, then you get a free entry the next year, or
mhm,
you get credit towards an entry the next year. And
mhm.
yeah, so it was pretty international, which was nice to see. I don't know the mix of male, female, or anything, but yeah, it was. I think there was only 190 competitors, so
How
it's
many
not.
finished then, Joe?
So what Shane has done is he's opened up an additional race. If you're cut off on day two, which is the big one, then you can drop down to the Cape Wrath Explorer, which you do the same route, but they drop you at a checkpoint further on, so you don't have to do the routes each day.
Okay.
So out of the 190, I think 90 finished the ultra, and then I don't know how many then finished. I think like 50 finished the Explorer, and then others were just injuries and yeah, just left, which is a bit
Yeah.
sad.
And being a physio, were you in demand at the end of each day?
No, I mean in my tent, we I helped out a bit, but essentially there was a medical tent, and everyone just went there.
I was going to say they probably thought they'd hit lucky jackpot in your tent.
But do you know whether it's the cost of the race or just that people have a disposable income or more time? There were a lot of doctors racing.
Okay.
So yeah,
So
yeah.
I took three women out about a couple of months ago on Dartmoor. Just they were training for it, and I think two out of three of them were doctors. Yeah.
Was I think one of them was Katie Robinson, but she because she was going to do it, and she messaged me that she was coming down to your camp, but she didn't actually race this year. She's deferred to next year. She didn't feel she was fit enough.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, she'll probably be a shame because I've never actually met her in person, but she's super friendly and helpful beforehand and after. So
Yeah, no, she seemed like it.
um,
What's next for you then, Joe? Because you've always got your eyes set on something. You must be
I've
thinking.
always got a plan.
Yeah, you always got a plan.
Well, I don't want to rush into anything because I've got to recover. But ultimately, I'm doing UTMB again this year.
Are you?
Yeah, last time. Got to give it one more pop.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm glutton for punishment, but I don't feel like I've done my best there. And this year I'm feeling much fitter and stronger, so I'm just going to give it one more go, and then put it to bed.
Brilliant. Okay. And then you fancy a crack at the Southwest Coast Path? Is that on the
One
cards?
day. Do you know, doing this has really given me insight to how awful you feel after running a long way. And it's that I don't mind pushing myself in races or events, but afterwards the recovery, is ages, and you think, God, is it really good for you? And I know it's not, but that puts me off. So I need the memories to fade before you ask me
Yeah.
a question like that.
Okay. I won't ask you any more like that. Presumably you got a bike. You get on your bike, do you? Is that how you recovered? You get out on your bike on Dartmoor?
Yeah, walk the dog. I'll
Yeah.
do a bit of swimming. I'll get out my bike. As I say, I could probably run this weekend if it wasn't for my shins being and tendons being sore. I actually don't feel too bad anymore. But yeah, I'll let them properly heal. Otherwise, I'll be running really awkwardly. And
Yeah.
actually, they're pretty sore, so I might actually start taking some ibuprofen now.
Yeah, yeah, you're allowed to. You're allowed to. So yeah, I might have to book you in at some point, Joe, as well, because I've got a little issue that I need
Niggle.
to see about. Yeah, but that's
Yeah, no worries. That'd
yeah,
be
so
cool. And also, hopefully, catch up for a run soon. I hope to get back to the fell races and some of the Dartmoor runners stuff now I'm back. But we'll see. They all seem to clash when I'm at work or something. But hopefully, I'll make it.
yeah. Well done, Joe. It's good to see you. Get rewarded for the effort that you put in.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Thanks for
Yeah,
your time.
I'm not a dog watcher. I'm really not. I find better things to do with my time. But I must admit, I did dip in and out in your case.
Thanks, appreciate that.
My children did wonder what I was doing. Anyway,
Yeah,
Joe, yeah,
awesome.
we'll catch up. Let's catch up soon. It's nice to chat to you. Finally,
Yeah,
have you on a podcast. But yeah, anyway, let's meet up
cool.
soon.
Cool. Thanks, Kerry. Cheers. Bye.
All the best. Bye, Joe.